Good morning, and I'm Samson Balogo, and this is Daybreak Live Extra on Dominion Television, Ibadan. We begin today's conversation about a recent occurrence at the National Assembly where families of detained military officers have taken their protest public following allegations of a coup plot. What are they demanding? What do we know about the detention so far? And how does this moment shape public perception of security, justice, and due process in the country? This is our Daybreak Gist this morning. We'll also bring you the weather report, and shortly after, Daybreak News and with the major developments affecting the day.
And Amanulu Akpoidu, we then turn our focus to the newspaper headlines. This morning's front pages reflect a mix of security concerns, public reactions, and public sentiment. We'll take a closer look at the key stories and the angles behind them with our analyst Adeyemi Adebisi, a public affairs analyst.
And I'm Oluwayemi Adelako. For today, our big story examines a recurring pattern in moments of national crisis. Crisis response, or PR ritual, the politics of condemnation. When incidents occur, official statement often follows swiftly. But beyond the language of condemnation, what reaction is taken and how effective is it? Joining us for that conversation is Honorable Molaja Olawi.
And before we close, Trend Watch will highlight the conversations gaining momentum across the country.
It is another morning of critical questions.
Right.
And let's begin this morning.
Yes, we shall begin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We must say good morning to our esteemed viewers out there. It has been one straight week of roller coaster stories. And as you would want to slow down, especially on a Friday, the stories are not slowing down. A lot has been happening, and stories are developing. The president was in Plateau Jos, and then we were talking about protests of wives and families of detained military officers and some who were said to be involved in the recent coup in the country, or let me say, what we the alleged coup, let's put it that way. And then the question is, what exactly is the problem? Was there ever a coup? Because at the point when this news actually broke, I think some of these online media houses broke the news, and then there was a counter report from the presidency that there was nothing like that. And a few months down the line, people were being handpicked from their homes, and some from their military bases, and say, look, you were involved in this particular coup, and then they have been in detention since then. So what happens to, for example, a soldier that has been accused or maybe confirmed to be a participant in a coup? And also, what happens to a civilian who was also used? Because I could remember there was this former chairman of a Nigerian Guild of Directors who was also, one way or the other, was part of the said coup and was also arrested. And their families are protesting. What will be the fate of these people? And what will the federal government do? Is protest enough to set them free from the shackles with which they have found themselves? It's a very big one on the show this morning.
Right. I think you're very spot on, especially taking it from the old announcements, there was a coup, there was no coup. And then I always say that, the battle, let me say the issues that we face in this country, you can always trace it to the foundation, because initially, the consistent dismissal of what later becomes the truth will always result in more controversy and then more issues for the country. So at the end of the day, you have arrested this person. I think the former director, that's Brigadier General Tuko, Gusau, came out to say that indeed there was an attempted coup. I think that was around October 4, and then about 16 officers were arrested, and then it's been over 6 months, and then what they said is, okay, we want to conduct investigations, and then I think there was even a time they announced that, okay, we are done conducting the investigations, and then the families are waiting, when are you going to try them? Because at the end of the day, if you have the evidence against them, you should take them to the court, and then let them plead their case. If you are found guilty, they face the tune, or they face the dance, and if they are not guilty, then you free them. But then over 6 months, the families, I think about 20 wives came out on that Wednesday, and then quite a number of children, even two months old baby was brought to the scene. And I think they were not there alone. They were accompanied by the likes of the popular lawyer DJ Adeyanju, and of course the activist, that's Omoyole Showore. And then people are saying Showore is always everywhere. He's always in a way he can gain that more popularity. But there is beyond that. He decided to just go with them, and then they were there with these women, and then the women were saying you have no right to actually, detain them without, trying them is not, constitutional. And they also mentioned that, detaining these people without trying them is injustice. And the children, if you watch the videos, honestly, you might be moved a little bit to say that, okay, these people are really sad about the whole situation. Yes, you have conducted investigations, but then can they be tried? Because at the end of the day, we want to know the bottom of this matter. And so going forward now, they are saying that after this whole, Coup thing, why is it that they have not been able to find a solution? Why is it that they have not been tried? I don't know whether it's because of, when it comes to army issues like this, you really cannot compare it to normal charges or normal cases. I think they are going to be tried by a particular court, not just maybe normal courts like the other issues. Maybe that's why it's stalling. Exactly. So maybe that's why it's stalling. I really cannot tell. But I want to believe that even during the military era, when issues like this happen, I don't think it took this long for them to actually solve this. I want to believe that, the court is already there, and then they can attend to the situation. So it's something that we can really solve, and then to ensure that nothing like this will happen again. So whether it was an attempt, some people are even saying, even the wives, one of them mentioned that, this is just, sinister. There's something sinister about the arrest beyond it was an attempt to coup. So we really cannot take that, as something that is true, especially when they have not been tried in court. You have the evidences, take them to court, let them plead their case, really.
How the government really attends to this issue is going to either deepen a case of a recurrence or stop or nip it in the bud. Let me put it that way. So this is why this is very important as of now, because if the government decides to just let it slide and probably forgive them, there's a price to pay. If the government decides to pursue it to the end, and we know what is likely to happen, especially with the recent, and what with the law speaks to that particularly, we know what will also happen from that line too. But there's something I kind of like checked out, and I saw that there's something called the contagion effect. And the contagion effect is such that if a coup attempt happens anywhere, whether failed or successful, the chances are that not just that nation, but every surrounding nation might want to also go and follow suit.
Right.
They might want to do the same, because we've seen almost every of the coup you've seen had a trace in neighboring countries.
Faso,
exactly, Mali, the Sahelian regions. And you can tell that this is actually, and Nigeria for now, the most populous black nation, economy-wise, not doing fairly, but it's just at the top, and you can't put it down. Talking about industry and some other, facets of life, Nigeria is right there. So we can say, in a lot of ways, some have said Nigeria is no longer the giant of Africa. But anyway, whether giant of Africa, but Nigeria is still a giant, in the sense that a lot of people,
giant, if not Nigeria.
So a lot of people still look up to Nigeria, because if you say, bring out the top African nations, Nigeria is tall. It might not be the topmost, but it's tall. So everybody gets to see, and whatever is tall is obvious, it's conspicuous, right? So people get to see the country Nigeria. So whatever happens from this issue, and I think that is why it is a bit delicate. If left to what should happen, it should not even take this long. Right. 160 days of detention, maybe it's like they are trying to think about forgiving. Because ideally, once you've attempted coup, I think I was speaking to one of my lecturers who was in the University of Ibadan at the time, and I remember he said something quite interesting, but not so interesting. They said they came to pick almost, even some lecturers that were involved at the time, some professors were actually picked, and unfortunately you cannot even hear anything about them again, because what happened. It's not, I don't want to put it all out how it happened, but a lot of persons were unpicked, and then I don't want to call what happened to them. But the case is, I think the government is trying to temper justice with mercy, and that's why we are seeing a prolonged case. I do not like the fact that, I don't like it when you parade children in front of camera, personally, right? Whatever the case is, those children are innocent. They really do not understand what treason in the country is. Not something to be forgiven easily, and it's something that it's like what we call, it's against the national peace, right? It's against the peace and serenity of the country. So if you commit that, or you have been alleged to commit that, then you have to dance to the tune. I know the wives are coming to say, whatever the case is, put it to the test of the court. Let the court decide, and let us have that proceeding. But I'm also afraid that when you do that, I know this was incited. There's no child that will come up and say, I'm not seeing my dad or I'm going to protest. They don't even know what protest is. So it must have been instigated by their parents and maybe some other persons to say, so let's go. And the problem is, if they forgive them, what happens to another set of people who wants to do the same? I saw some of the names of the people. I saw some of them are not the highest ranked officials. Some of them are mid-ranked. And I think from research, mid-ranks to highest also are the people who intentionally plot this coup. And you can tell a lot of things. But I do personally don't like it when it has to be that whenever we want to protest, we bring our children out in the sun and say we have carry placards. These children are too young to understand what they are doing right now. You might say they miss their fathers, which is okay. It's okay to miss your parents. And I'm not trying to be without emotions. I'm saying this because I understand what it also means to forgive those people, or probably not, put them to the test of the court in the courtroom, right? And I'm saying this that I personally do not like when you parade children in front of camera, because these children someday will grow up. And God forbid, I don't know, whatever happens to their father, that would be another kind of story. But the story would be that I saw you when you were young, you were protesting that your father should be released. And a lot of, you don't even want to imagine all of the stigma and those things. And because social media does not forgive. And if we have the faces of those children on social media and on every internet facility that you can get,
Internet doesn't forget.
It does not forget, and it does not make so much sense for these kids. Why don't we have the mothers alone? I saw that Showore was part of this. I'm not really against anybody, but I do not like it when you parade children. That's my point. And again, let me now take it back to whether or not the government will forgive this people. But in a way, I was trying to see this, and I saw that maybe the government is trying to help you by not prosecuting them yet, by not taking it to court yet. Maybe detention is just a way to give them the punishment so that they can know you've done something evil. So they just, and then later secretly dispose of them, but maybe release them back to society. But the case for me now is that just like they have pleaded, they want instant court action. They want the court to take its full course. So let's have it. If they did something wrong, then they should dance to the tune of whatever music they play, and that should be the case. I also support that. But going forward, I think there should be a rule against this kind of things, involving kids in this kind of protest. They do not have to protest at a young age. They don't have that.
Well, I'll start from where you stopped. I think the protest involving the kids was instigated by some people who were also present. No need mentioning names, of course, they were also present on the protest ground. And I really do not like when people look for cheap popularity, riding on the misfortune of some other people just to get that. I think that should stop on humanity basis. Away from there, you also mentioned that if they would be forgiven, I think according to the Nigerian Constitution and the Criminal Code, says treason, treasonable felony, and some other criminal charges are not forgivable, especially when it just happened. It might be a long-time thing, and then they say, oh, probably you have served some years in jail, and they say, oh, let's just forgive you, okay? So I don't think they are thinking of that right now. And judging by what has been happening, especially for those who didn't even commit treason, it is about fraud. They are facing a lot at this time. We have seen people come out of court and here. Even Malam Nasir, after the burial of his mother, was sent back to where he came from. So it tells you that I don't think anybody will be looking at what has been done, if at all there's anything like that, as something that can be forgiven just like that in an instant. Away from there, nobody releases some people who have been adjudged to be criminals unless investigation has been completed. And then if that will be done, it will be on bail. And that, for me, I don't think will happen to someone who is said to have committed treason or treasonable felony. Also, away from there, it is also important to note that pardon works in Nigeria, but then not in all cases. We have seen it work, but most of the times, if you check, it has always been about fraud. Someone stole so amount of money after so many years. It happened to Alamesia when Goodluck Jonathan said, yes, he's my boss, I think we have to pardon him now, and it was done. So it works in Nigeria, but then conviction will have to come first. You cannot be pardoned unless you have been convicted. So they will have to go through that process of conviction. Away from there, I think as it stands, the case might not be as quick as people think it will come, because according to information out there, I was made to understand the fact that civilians are involved in this. And once civilians are involved, if it is court-martial, it can be as quick as possible because they know the law, and even an average soldier knows that if you do anything that has to do with mutiny, treasonable felony within the Nigerian military ranks, you know what exactly awaits you as an end result. So it will be as quick as that. But if civilians are involved, it will be taken to the court of law, which is the Federal High Court in Nigeria. And that will include no judge will preside over a case that has no basis and no thorough investigation. In fact, most of the times, the investigation would have pointed towards a particular direction that, oh, these people have done this, and then this is to be done. So now where I'm going is that if civilians are accused of plotting against the government of this President, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, they will be tried in a civilian court, okay? And the other ones that are involved will also be court-martialed. So it's a two-way thing.
It's complicated.
It's complicated, one way or the other. So it has to be properly taken care of. Otherwise, there will be an issue. Also, if military personnel are involved, a court-martial is a military tribunal that handles mutiny, disobedience, attempted overthrow within armed forces. And overthrow is considered to be the greatest offense you can commit within the military ranks. So it means that whoever is that civilian that has mixed up with the military to commit this kind of offense against the Nigerian Constitution, which is the Constitution and the Criminal Code, then a larger problem awaits them. Because nobody is going to sweep that under the carpet. Because one thing is that some people will now ride on the fact that some people fought to see the democracy Nigeria currently enjoys today, which started in 1999, down to 2026. And they wouldn't want that to be truncated. Because people who lived, some people who experienced, at least some of us who experienced military rule at that time, would understand what it means. The difference is clear. Sometimes I laugh when people say, oh, I want the military to take over. I just smile because you were not there. I mean, Michael will tell you what he saw at that time because you practically no freedom. And some people, they suffer so much that they have to go to sawmill to pack sawdust so they could cook. Now you get gas. It's quite simple. Now you can buy anything you like and just do whatever you like. And that time was not as easy, especially for business owners. So you cannot just say, oh, because you are discontent with the current administration and you want military to take over, just like that. Just go back in history. Maybe you should read more, and then you would understand what you are calling.
Right. So let me take it from the angle of forgiveness. I really do not think it's a question of forgiveness. Why do I say that? Because according to the law, even the thought of any coup is a crime.
It's a crime.
Whether you later embark on it or not is a crime. So at the end of the day, I think it's a question
in fact, that you knew, even if you were not a participant, that you knew it was going to be done, and you did not say anything to the constituted authority, just like late Governor Isiaka Abiola Ajimobi will say. It's a crime under the law. In fact, you are a participant.
Right.
Because you heard about it and you said nothing.
It's just like in the example where if you sit close to someone who is cheating and you didn't mention anything, you are right.
That's why we say if you say something,
say something. All right, so going back to the discussion right now. So I really think it's a question of are they guilty or not? And how are we going to ascertain that? Let them be tried. It's very simple. So at the end of the day, maybe this whole process, in as much as a lot of persons might not, support it because of the children, and of course, is a bit, complicated. Maybe it will hasten the government in a way, or let me say the army, and then maybe now that, especially the location of that process, maybe they will find a way to hasten up things to say that, okay, why is it that these people have not been tried? Because in this same country, we have seen cases that lasted for about 4 or 5 years, and they are still on the matter.
There are more.
So if
that last longer than that.
Honestly, so I don't know why things like that will take so long. And then going back to the whole issue of coup or no coup, there's something that is so sad about this entire situation. Is the fact that the government they don't know how to trace issues. If at all the successful coup I've seen, not just in Africa now, or let me say majorly Africa now, it started with a rumor. Why is it that there can be a chance, of a coup? And then I think if you go back, the reason why the military took over, in the 60s, in the 70s and 80s,
lack of credible intel.
Exactly. We had external factors, we had internal factors. One example of internal factor is, there were palace coup within the military, because some junior officers felt like, okay, why is it that the senior officers are treated like kings and the junior ones are treated, they are not treated so well.
Not so good.
The senior officer, they have access to the suite, they have access to luxurious cars, to a lot of it. And then the junior officers, they will just work and get tired. And then external factor, intense corruption in the country. I remember the case of Operation Wetie that led to the death of so many. I remember the case of Action Group crisis that led to the death of so many. So these are crises here and there. So that was the reason why the military felt, okay, these people are not doing right, let's just take over. And then they took over. Just like you mentioned, I was not around during the military era, right? But I read archival materials, I saw videos, and I can tell you that we do not want any coup
repeat of that
in Nigeria as we speak. I mean, one of my lecturers would always say that, the worst of a democratic government is better than a military government. You don't want to taste something like that again. So the government can find a way to trace whatever it is, that even led to an attempted coup in the first place. Are the factors external or are they internal? As a matter of fact, if the factors are internal, you can deal with it. Why is it that some soldiers are not really treated fairly? I recall that recently the president said, let his entire salary, ever since he became president, let them take that money into taking care exactly of soldiers' wife, and then even a lot of persons who were maimed during war and things like that. That's excellent. That's a way to deal with things. Maybe because of this whole attempted coup, we decided to do that. But there are other things that the president and of course the government can do to tackle the internal factors. And of course, how do we even tackle the external factors that are so obvious, to every Nigerian? Corruption is intense, and it's not just at the federal level. Every level, the state, the local government, these are the things that we should begin to look at. So at the end of the day, we don't want, because look at all this Burkina Faso, it all started with a rumor. It all started with saying it's not a coup, it's a coup, this and that. If we trace the issues, we can always put an end to this attempted coup or no attempted coup, really.
So let me speak briefly to the issue of the coup. Of course, we know that detaining a citizen of the country for more than 6 months contravenes the Section 35 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. And that's even something that human rights activists and human rights concerned people would want to query, especially now. But I'm also looking at one historical context. But let me also speak that there's something that might happen, which is the erosion of military morale and discipline. If there's any sector in any nation that is more disciplined than the military, I bet to debate that. They are regimented. Some of us, when we served, we saw what happened, right? Their life was so regimented. You have to follow processes. You follow all that command. It's a chain of command. You get this, you do it. So they are the most disciplined set of people you can ever meet. That's why, especially in a sane society anyway. But this is the case now. What can this mean for them? Their morale and their discipline. If this does not really get handled properly, it can demoralize, it can erode the discipline that has been instilled in the military sector. And that is what they work with. And you don't want that to happen. And also their morale. Nigeria is currently facing a lot of issues. It's the job, the responsibility of the military to cater to it. They are fighting insurgents in different parts of the country, and they are really, some of them are not even sleeping well. So all of these can mean so much for them that let's see how these people are going to be treated. Anybody, because what about we? They're saying that if somebody did something wrong and you are not part of it, and then the person still gets a pardon, just like we used to say about pardoning repentant bandits, right? So it will just make everybody feel like, so what's the point of doing good? Why am I doing good all this while? That someone is doing something evil, and then you are still pardoning the person, right? So that's exactly what I'm trying to speak to say, I think in Turkey, there was a time it happened, and the historical context tells us that, the way they handled it in Turkey, I think that was in 2016, there was a failed coup attempt against Erdogan.
They did not even have the time to have this kind of conversation.
So what happened was that the government purged every one of them. It was a fast one. The government purged thousands of officers, right? And that in a way stabilized things in the country, the system, the government system. And it was so a lot of persons are taking insight to say, yes, maybe the coups in the past were a long time. What about the recent 2016 Turkey? How did they handle it? I think I love to say that there's no island. Nobody's an island, right, in yourself. what we do is we can pick from here, from there, because you don't want to wait to get the experience yourself every time to learn. You don't have to be the one suffering before you learn from that. You can take from the suffering of Mr. A, take from the suffering of Mr. B, and put it together. How can I learn from this? And then you move forward. Because whatever happens in this case, I tell you for a fact, has a far-reaching implication beyond 2020, 2030, 2050, and even much more later, especially with the country being at the point it is, and then the Nigerian state being a very, maybe, I don't want to say commendable, but a highly placed society in the African terrain. So I really want to say it out to the government officials that this has to be really taken care of as fast as possible.
All right. That's you just gave it the best definition. I think timing is also of the essence in all of this, because families of these people, they just want to have a closure. They want to know what exactly is happening to their family members who have been in detention for God knows how long. But then
160 days.
160 days. That's a lot.
Oh, you see kids were sometimes were arrested. You won't hear about them in like years.
Right. It does happen. The thing is, you see, when this kind of issue happens, and then some people have been arrested, okay, national security trumps the Constitution. Okay, it will take precedence. They have to, if it is about national security, whatever it is in the Constitution will have to be placed on hold, that normalcy is returned. You just mentioned that in Turkey, nobody had the conversation like this. I mean, they took care of business, and today Turkey is Turkey, and nobody is saying anything about it. In fact, nobody, across the world, I think people just forget about it and they let it slide. Now, lastly, before we go, I think you mentioned something that really needs to, we need to talk about it. Yes, we are talking about the military officers and some civilians that were involved. How about the chances that there are sponsors? Okay? Most of the times, these sponsors will go scot-free, because they are most likely the eyes and mighties in the society, and they are untouchable, so they go scot-free. The ones who were the tools will now be made to bear the brunt of the whole crisis. And sometimes I do say this: don't allow yourself to be made a tool, because you might just not be an essential tool at the end of the day. You might just be disposable, and that will be a crisis for yourself, for the family, and then for the people who solely rely on you for income. And that's what you have when you have their family members by the side of the road protesting, because most of them are the breadwinners of their families from top to bottom. And look at the situation now. These things, coup is a very complex issue. You are not sure. In fact, attempting it means that you have maybe about 5% chance of carrying it out, because a wind of it by the people at the top in the military might just put an end, and that is what you had there. So let's
don't die in anybody's war. And then there was one time I mentioned that most of the soldiers, their wives, most of them, their wives don't work.
They don't, because
they depend on the husband.
They move often. I mean, you cannot have a settled life as a wife of a military officer.
You cannot have a serious business or a serious
today in
job.
Maiduguri, tomorrow in Borno, in Kano, and then the next day in Ibadan. So they are always moving. Even their children usually do not have a stable life. They are always moving from, unless they just leave them somewhere. You stay here. Let me go and come back and shuffle. But it doesn't really work that way, especially when you are moving across the country from one end to another. I mean, it's really important that the government also looks at the welfare of an average military officer and see if they actually cares for their families. Otherwise, we'll continue to have issues like this on our table. And that's the convenient point to leave this topic this morning. So thank you for joining us so far.